Hello, everyone. A couple of announcements before we begin today. First off, next month, when we do this program, it will be up in the council chamber. So please arrive early. Seats are somewhat more limited there. And parking is obviously always difficult. So do come early when we have Science Demystified next month. Now, a couple of events coming up. We tomorrow, Hershey Dwoskin is back within the headlines at 2 o'clock in the multi-purpose room, not here in the auditorium. So again, come early. Seats are limited. On May 6th, we have an author coming at 2 o'clock, Leslie Chesterman. She is Montreal's iconic culinary voice, and she will be here with her sweet treats. Tickets are available at the front desk. They are $5 for women's club members and library members, and $7 for non-members. And then Thursday, in case you're not tired, we have a concert at 7 o'clock. Marianne Trudel presents Chicoute. No need for tickets. Just come here for 7 o'clock. And that's it. Without further ado, here's Dr. Joe with Science Demystified.
Thank you. And for those of you who were here last time and heard about my back problems, it's mostly resolved. Time is a great cure, so I can actually stand and walk. It's interesting. We filled this room exactly. Hardly any empty seats. We're back to pre-COVID times. All right, a little bit of advertising. On May 13th, I'm going to speak at McGill, and this is a brand new presentation on searching for the fountain of youth. Any of you are searching for this? Or any of you happy with getting older? So if you want to join us, it's at 7 o'clock. That's a week from Wednesday, and there is no game that night. It's the game here is on the 12th, and because otherwise we would have had to cancel. In any case, you do need to register, so we have an idea of how many people are going to come. So you can register at mcgill.ca/OSS, or you can just use the whatchamacallit there. You may even be able to reach it with your phone. Sometimes it does that, but I'll put it up again at the end so you can come closer if you're interested, and then just snap that. All right. Well, today we're going to address the health food business, which basically is interested in wellness. What does that really mean? I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about the pursuit of optimal health, right? I mean, that really is what we are interested in. We're interested in the health span, not only in the lifespan. I mean, the lifespan is the number of years that we're expected to live, but what we're really interested in is the health span. That is, how many years can you live without developing any kind of chronic disease? Well, of course, these days, a lot of interest in that, and especially in the nutrition area. I mean, we're being told what to eat, what not to eat, ad nauseum. The fact is that we're living in an age with an information explosion. It's coming at us all the time. And it really is a tornado of information, right? I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. And it's hard to know what to make of this because we're being screamed at from all sides. And some of these are absolute quacks, many of them, but some, of course, are legitimate scientists. And often it is difficult to know which is which because there's so much fakery out there. And they're very good at, convincing you. They're very, very seductive. So these are indeed very difficult times when you need to discern what is real and what is fake. For example, you look at these two people, and you might be interested in meeting them. except that you'll never do that because they're not real. These people do not exist. They're created by artificial intelligence, which of course means taking features from different people and putting it all together. But it's almost impossible to tell, right? And so we are living in an age of fakery. And sometimes, of course, obviously you can tell the difference. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks that you can actually catch a virus from a computer. But other than that, it can be difficult. For example, you see, headlines like this, beaver butt found in ice cream, where they actually make a case for this. The Food Babe, who we've talked about before, talks about this and says that the vanilla that is put into vanilla ice cream the flavor is extracted from organs on the rear end of a beaver, which is not true. But there are chemicals that are extracted from the rear end of a beaver that in the laboratory could indeed be turned into vanillin. It's an interesting academic pursuit, but there's no beaver butt in the ice cream. This is just nonsense. But if you read the article, it can sound very convincing because they have all the scientific words in there, and sounds very good. Today, there are wellness influencers all over the place. And some of them have some legitimate knowledge. Most of them don't. They're self-declared experts. And they have their programs on the internet. They spread their Instagrams, their TikToks, whatever. And they make a lot of money. A lot of money. This one here, Michelle Lewin, I had never heard of because she does her things in South America. But as you can see, she has 16 million followers. And when she posts something, she makes about $42,000 per post. And look at all the others. I mean, this is a huge amount of money. Andrew Huberman, who some of you may have heard of, he actually is a legitimate scientist. And that's what makes it even more difficult when a legitimate scientist gets into this, because when they start pushing some supplements, then of course people go for it because he does have all the credentials. But when a legitimate scientist descends into the pit of nonsense, it's more dangerous than Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, Gwyneth is really a very interesting case. As you know, she's she's a good actress. So let's give her that due. She's been in a number of movies which were, highly respected. But she has grown this company, Goop, which is basically nonsense, selling ridiculous supplements and making silly claims. Oregano oil wards off colds. Magnesium pills ensure sleep. Spraying with colloidal silver staves off germs. Daikon, which is a type of Japanese radish, for stomach aches. No, none of this has scientific basis. Magnesium, maybe. There's some evidence that magnesium can enhance sleep, but it is not really compelling evidence. And then every single nutritionist, doctor, and health conscious person I've ever come across seems to concur the gluten is tough on system, and many of us are at best intolerant of it and worst allergic to it. Well, I don't know what kind of medical circles she circulates in, because this is utter nonsense. The only people to whom gluten matters are people who suffer from gluten intolerance, that is celiac disease, which is less than 1% of the population. Now, indeed, if you do have celiac disease, you do have to be very careful about, avoiding even traces of gluten. because you can have very, very significant reactions to milligram amounts of gluten. But most of us, of course, can happily eat wheat and rye and barley without any problem. So this is just nonsense. And then we have Anthony William, who calls himself the medical medium. Well, he's an interesting case. Zero scientific education, nothing. Of course, that has never prevented someone from writing a book that becomes a bestseller. This is on Amazon and on the New York Times bestseller list. And he actually has a radio show in Florida where he answers questions from callers about health. And he gives them all kinds of advice. But he has no background to do this. How does he get away with it from being, accused of practicing medicine without a license, which is basically what he's doing? Because this is one clever critter. He says that he is actually a medium, which means that he can converse with the spirit world. And he has a contact in the spirit world who happens to be a physician. And this is where he gets his information. So he cannot be accused of practicing medicine without a license because he says all he is doing is conveying the information that he gets from the other side. So he's nothing but a conduit. And believe it or not, people buy into this. Now, another interesting feature of this is that this spirit doctor on the other side seems to have a knowledge about how to cure every disease. And that is with celery juice. This is the advice that he gives no matter what your ailment is. And needless to say, the medical medium has written a book on celery juice and how it is a total cure-all. It's not. Celery is not even a nutritious vegetable. It's 98% water. The only reason to eat celery is if you happen to like it, which to me is unimaginable that someone would do that. I mean, maybe it does something when you put the celery root into your chicken soup. I do that. That gives it some flavor. That's that big brown thing you get. But the celery itself is tasteless and obviously it has no physiological activity. So we can dismiss the medical medium alongside Gwyneth Paltrow. Now, here we have a very interesting story of Jordan Younger, who really made it big on the internet as the blonde vegan. Well, of course, it certainly helps that she's a good-looking lady. That's always a good selling point. And her shtick was that she was healthy and she knew how to keep healthy and what to do. And her promotion was to live a gluten-free life, a sugar-free life, oil-free, grain-free, legume-free, dairy-free, and be a raw organic vegan. Undoubtedly, she subsists on kale and other monstrosities. But she describes how she makes her blueberry cocktail and her 5-day cleanse program. But there's a big but here. It turns out that this diet, which is free of all food, made her quite sick. And as you can see, she admits that her diet almost killed her. But it didn't kill her drive for making money, because now she became popular as the person who broke from that vegan diet and achieved health in that way. So she ditched her vegan diet, and believe it or not, she was attacked for this by all of her fans who had been following her previous all-nothing diet. And now she was, seen as a traitor to the cause. And she now has tried to satisfy both sides. She has now become the balanced blonde. So she's not totally vegan, but she still promotes, a diet that has lots of vegetables. Nothing wrong with that. And also, she has become a spiritual teacher, a healer, an artist, and a light worker. I'm not sure what that means. I don't think it means the ability to change light bulbs. And she has become a visionary. I really don't know what any of those terms mean, but I suspect when you go and see her for some sort of consultation, it will not be free. So there's a lot of money to be made in this business. And it's not only in North America. These twins are in England, the Hemsley twins. Needless to say, no science whatsoever. They've not had any science in school, but that doesn't seem to be a prerequisite. As long as you know your astrological signs, because then you know when to grow your vegetables. You see, they have to be planted at certain times, of the year dictated by, astrology. And bone broth, agave nectar, no dairy, no starch, no gluten, of course, no proteins, and no carbohydrates eaten together. Again, this is no justification whatsoever. But, you see this stuff in multiple versions on the internet. And it actually leads to problems. It leads to something that we call orthorexia, which we're seeing. Physicians are seeing this. And this is obsessive behavior in the pursuit of, a healthy diet, and what they call clean eating. They all want to eat clean. It doesn't mean that you don't want to eat off a dirty floor. It has a different meaning. The dirty foods are the foods that are ultra processed, which have lots of additives. Now, of course, we've spoken about this before. Ultra processed foods should be very limited in one's diet. And what you should be eating are the clean things. Now, of course, scientifically, we agree with the concept, except when it's taken to the extremes. When you become so obsessed with these things that you think that if there's a chemical additive in the food, it was put in there by some nefarious chemist who is just intent on poisoning you for some unknown reason. Obviously, today we know that eating a diet that is mostly fruits, vegetables, whole seeds, yes, that's the way to go. But it does not mean that if you eat that occasional slice of pizza, that it's going to poison you. And what is really behind this dirty and clean concept is what we call the natural fallacy. The belief that if something comes from nature, it is necessarily superior to something that is made in the lab. This is the appeal to nature. Of course, it is also the appeal to sell things, although they, of course, ascribe that to commercial products. But the health food industry is just as bent on making money as is the commercial food industry. But anyway, in this appeal to nature, anything that contains, quote, synthetic chemicals is bad. But if it comes from a natural source, it's good. But as you know, you'll see in a minute, and as we've talked about often before, nature is not necessarily benign. There are many dangerous substances that come from nature. However, nature is very marketable. If you sell a cough syrup and you say that the active ingredient is honey, it sounds much better than if you say is dextromethorphan, even though dextromethorphan works far, far better than honey. And obviously, there are also cheaper ways to buy honey than buying it as medicine. Honey may make your throat feel it may have some soothing effect on the throat, but that doesn't mean that you need to get it, as a medicine. You can eat a spoonful of honey. But nature sells, if you have a cold, they will tell you that you need echinacea. And of course, there's always pictures of the flower on there. And echinacea is pretty flower. You see it. People plant it for its ornamental value. It's very attractive. But a liquid extract of it is not going to cure your cold. Neither is lavender going to treat your anxiety, even though it is natural. Believe it or not, you can buy pillows which are infused with lavender, claiming that this will make you sleep better because it will relieve you of anxiety at night. It sounds very good, but of course, there is no evidence for it. Now, also, I think we have to be clear saying that while it is certainly true that if something is natural, it doesn't mean that it is safe and good for you, neither does it mean that it is necessarily bad or useless. There obviously are natural substances that are useful. For example, there is a modicum of evidence for ginger alleviating nausea. It is not as good as the medications that can be used to alleviate nausea, but it is something. So when you go on a cruise and suspect that you might get sick, well, taking along some ginger may be okay. Although, of course, they will also make available to you legitimate medicine that will treat your nausea. And furthermore, these days, when you go on a cruise, when you go on the large cruise ships, you really don't have to worry about seasickness. They're designed in such a way that there's virtually no motion. You may have a concern about food safety. As you know, there have been some outbreaks, and we have this terrible episode now on the cruise ship, which is somewhere around South Africa, an outbreak of hantavirus. You don't want to deal with that. Hantavirus is spread by the feces of rodents, and it is very dangerous. And 3 people have died on the cruise, and the rest of the people, of course, are being evacuated. Now, there are some medicines, of course, that also derive from natural sources. A classic example is the Pacific yew tree, the bark of which gives us Taxol. And Taxol is a very commonly used medication, treatment of breast cancer and other cancers. However, of course, when you're given this for treatment, you're not told to go and chew on the bark of the tree. The active ingredient, which is paclitaxel, has been isolated. And of course, it can be standardized so that when you get an injection of paclitaxel, you know that you're getting the right dose that has been tested for this condition. So yes, it is derived from nature, but it is highly processed to make sure that you're getting only the active ingredient and nothing else. Another drug that is derived from nature is vincristine, which comes from Madagascar periwinkle. And this also is used in the treatment of cancer. But, once again, you're not told to graze in a field of flowers. There's a lot of technology in isolating this because, as with any plant product, there are thousands of compounds in there. And this is something that, people don't realize is just how complex nature is. And to give you, a classic example, you just think of your morning cup of coffee. It contains over 1,000 different compounds in addition to caffeine. So, it's quite obvious why different coffees will have different flavors because they have a different composition. So nature can give us some beneficial substances. So it's not that nature is bad or good. It all depends on what you know and what you have tested. But for sure, nature does not equal safe. And there are plenty of examples of that. Hemlock. It may be a very pretty plant, but it contains a compound called cote-saint-luc, which is highly toxic. And if you know your Greek history, who was poisoned with hemlock? Come on. Socrates. Socrates was accused of defiling his students' minds, and he was given the choice of how he was going to be killed, and the choice was poison hemlock, which contains a compound called cote-saint-luc. And to highlight how poisonous plants can be, this is the castor bean plant. And it's called because it produces these beans. The beans contain a compound called ricin, which is the second most toxic substance that we know. Anyone know what is the most toxic substance? Botulin, which comes from Botulinum clostridium, which is a bacterium. But ricin is very close in toxicity. A few milligrams of ricin could kill the population of Montreal. It's that toxic. And you may remember just after 9/11 when people were getting this powder in the mail, officials in the US, and it did contain ricin. Luckily, they caught it. So people were never exposed to it because even just exposing to the powder, just inhaling a bit of that can kill you. It's a horrifically poisonous substance. If you want to see the castor bean plant, it's not difficult. They're grown in many parks in Montreal. If you go to the park on Hudson, you'll see a lot of the castor bean plant. None of the other parts of the plant are poisonous. It is only the ricin inside of the bean. So you would have to bite into a bean, which you could not do because your tooth would break. It's so hard. But you could grind it up and extract the ricin. That could be done. Now, interestingly enough, the plant also produces an oil, castor oil, which is used. The castor oil is a very effective laxative. And you don't have to worry about it containing any ricin because it is not extracted from the beans of the plant. It's extracted from the roots. But it is interesting to know that this plant, which grows everywhere, produces the second most toxic substance that we know. And then, of course, there's poison ivy, right? I mean, you don't want to go rolling around in that, even though it looks like an attractive plant. And you don't want to be eating the death cap mushroom. You will only taste that once because the amatoxin that it contains is an extremely poisonous substance. There's a case now in Australia where a woman poisoned a number of people by putting the death cap mushroom into their food. It's gotten a lot of publicity in Australia. So yeah, mushrooms can do you in. Root beer. At one time, it was flavored with oil of sassafras. Sassafras is a plant, and it produces a flavor compound called saffrole, which has kind of a bitter taste. And it does come from a root. It comes from a root, and it was put into root beer. This is something I have never understood why people would ever drink root beer. It has the most foul taste. Anyway, they took the saffrole out of it because it was deemed to be carcinogenic. So now you don't have to worry about being poisoned by root beer. It's just your taste buds that are going to be killed by this thing. But I remember, anyway, when I was growing up, there was an A&W on DeCarry where they had waitresses that served you, and they came out on roller skates. Anyone remember that on DeCarry? And anyone remember what the thing to do was there? They would come and put a tray on your window, right? And they will put the root beer there in these mugs. You remember what was the thing to do? Take the mugs. The mugs were very nice. They were made of this thick glass. So the thing was to somehow leave the tray behind and then take off with the mugs. Anyway, they don't have those mugs anymore, and neither do they have the roller skating waitresses. They had those at the Orange Julep too. They had the roller skating waitresses. Yeah, those were the good old days. Talking about natural poisons, epibetadine, which is the so-called poison arrow frog, or the frog from which it comes is called the poison arrow frog, for very good reason. Because natives in South America would take their arrows and rub the tip on the back of the frog, so that when the arrow hit game, it would be poisoned. They still do that today, both on arrows and on darts. Now, interesting enough, epibetadine in very small doses is also an effective painkiller. The only problem with it is that its therapeutic window is too narrow to be used. That is, the effect that, or the amount that kills pain is too close to the amount that is lethal. But epibetadine is the stuff that is used when you see big animals brought down by, you see an elephant, for example, being brought down by an arrow or by a dart. This is what is used. And you can imagine how potent it is if it brings down an elephant or a lion, like almost instantly. Another natural toxin is the one that comes from this jellyfish. And if you have an encounter with it, it will be memorable because it leaves its calling card. And it can be terribly itchy, but there are also some jellyfish that contain a toxin that is so potent that it can kill you. And these are mostly found around New Zealand and Australia. And every year, there are a few people who die from their encounter with a jellyfish. But as I told you, the most potent toxin that exists is natural. It is the one that is produced by the Botulinum clostridium bacterium. So nature is fascinating, but it does give us all of these toxins. But now I want to tell you a real story about this, about how careful you have to be with natural substances. I want to tell you the story of so-called black bloodroot salve. And this basically was the plot of, I wouldn't call it exactly a documentary, but it was a documentary with some adjustments that was on Netflix called Apple Cider Vinegar. Did any of you see it? It was very, very good. And it was based on a real case with some changes, but not the changes were not significant. They were mostly to make the thing more entertaining, but the science behind it, I'm gonna tell you, was correct. Now, one of the interesting things in it was that the title was apple cider vinegar, and apple cider vinegar played no role in this. It wasn't even mentioned. But apple cider vinegar is kind of regarded, as a form of alternative medicine. I mean, people use it because they think it brings down their cholesterol, or, it has other beneficial properties, which it does not have. So that's why, they called it that, because this really is a critique of alternative medicine. And as you can see in the top right-hand corner there, she's shown throwing out the apple cider vinegar, which of course implies that, it doesn't work. Now, it is a true story of the woman who indeed did fool the world. And this is the actress who actually played her, who actually was quite similar to the real person. The real person being Belle Gibson. And what a fascinating story this is. She was very young, in her early 20s, and she received a tremendous amount of publicity because she claimed that she had cured herself of a terrible cancer with natural means. And the cancer she cured herself of, supposedly, was glioblastoma. GBM is maybe the worst poison, or the worst tumor that exists. And unfortunately, I'm very familiar with GBM because that's what my wife died of. So obviously, when I saw this, I was very alerted to watching this and the story of Belle Gibson. And she said that she had been diagnosed with GBM, but she cured herself with all kinds of alternative treatments. And she got a tremendous amount of publicity. There were articles written about her. She was all over TV. She made a lot of money because she even came up with an app. And this was in the early days when apps were not so common. She actually came up with an app telling people what foods to eat, or what cured herself of cancer. She came up with a book, The Whole Pantry, in which she also described the foods that had helped her beat this terrible disease. But in many of her articles, she also fear-mongered about, fluoridated water, about how the HPV vaccine was terrible, and that it was Gardasil, which had actually caused her brain tumor. Well, Gardasil, of course, is the vaccine that protects young people from sexually transmitted disease, the HPV virus. And it has had tremendous benefits. I mean, there's no question about it. So she was kind of a predecessor to the jerk who runs the U.S. pyramid now, Kennedy, who has basically the same kind of beliefs. That vaccines cause autism, and he likes to drink raw milk. he doesn't believe that AIDS is caused by the HIV virus, and I mean all of this stuff. And I mean, every time I think of how this guy is the U.S. Secretary of Health, it just turns my stomach because he has no medical background whatsoever. He fills American minds, which generally are pretty empty, so it's easy to fill them with all kinds of nonsense. Now, it is true that on occasion he has said some good things. Certainly, he's an advocate of staying away from ultra-processed foods, which I mean that's good because this is what America subsists on. So, but anyway, Mel Gibson was in the same vein, scaremongering and making money off of it. Now, back to the Netflix presentation. One of the characters in it was Mila Blake, who was actually based on a real person. When they say the names have been changed to protect whatever, and she was based on a real life wellness influencer by the name of Jessica Ainscough. And Jessica, in real life and in her character in the film, suffered from epiloid sarcoma, which is a terrible, terrible disease. It starts with blisters on the arm. Generally, it's not properly diagnosed early enough, and it leads to death. And when it starts on the arm, the only possible treatment is amputation, which of course nobody wants to have. Anyway, the real life Jessica Ainscough was indeed she called herself the wellness warrior, and she promoted the product called Black Salve that she said that she used on herself to try to treat her terrible form of cancer. Well, this stuff comes from the root of the bloodroot plant. And it's a pretty good name for this plant because the root really looks like it bleeds. It's red. And from this, this actually has an ingredient called sanguinarin, which is extremely, extremely corrosive. So corrosive that when you put it on your skin, that's what happens. Why would someone put this on their skin? Because it is promoted as a treatment for skin cancer, that it will kill the cancer, which of course it does not do. It just makes things worse. Anyway, they actually sell this. Well, not exactly in pharmacies. They sell it in some health food stores, and also privately, some of these wellness influencers will sell it to treat all kinds of skin diseases, particularly skin cancer. And there are horrific stories about this. Helen Lawson was a nurse in Australia, a nurse who you think would be knowledgeable, but when you're diagnosed of a terrible disease, logic goes out the window, especially when it's a condition for which you know that there is no real treatment. So she fell into the hands of Dennis Wayne Jensen, a sort of alternative healer, who told her that her condition could be cured by rubbing this stuff on her belly. It was terrible. I can't even show you the real picture. You have to blur it because, the blisters were awful. And the poor woman died of this. So this is real life. And this is also, of course, was portrayed in the film. Now, of course, they didn't name her. They had the character who I told you in Apple Cider Vinegar, Mila Blake, who goes through the same thing. And like the real Jessica, who's the other person on whom that character was based, like her, went to seek medical care in Mexico. Mexico is loaded with these alternative clinics, which try to capitalize on desperate people. Mostly from the U.S. People who will go there, pay lots of money to get useless treatment. Jessica actually was Australian. She came from Australia. Now, the clinic that they name in the movie was given a different name, but what they really were talking about was a real life clinic called the Gerson Clinic, which is in Mexico. And here, the treatments for whatever ails you are based on drinking various fruit juices and on coffee enemas. And here is what they claim, the purported benefits. Liver detoxification. First of all, I mean, that doesn't even make sense. Liver detoxification is a meaningless term. Advocates suggest that coffee enemas stimulate the liver to produce more glutathione, a powerful antioxidant that helps neutralize toxins, and total nonsense. Increased bile flow, that the coffee is believed to cause the bile ducts to open, allowing more toxins to be flushed from the liver. And they never say what these toxins are. They're always unnamed. So, they go on with this spree of information about the benefits of coffee enemas. Now, here's the truth. Putting coffee up your rectum is not a smart thing to do. It has all these, possible risk associated with it. Now, the Gerson Clinic was founded by Max Gerson, who was a legitimate physician, who was educated in Germany, and he came to the U.S. And he came up with these strange ideas. And when a doctor goes over to the dark side, it's the worst because they know the language, right? And they know all of the terms, and they can make it sound very scientific. And much has been written about and by people in the Gerson Institute. And he himself came out, with the cancer therapy, also called the Gerson therapy, with the juices and the coffee enemas. But there's more to it. I mean, all of these things, they inject you with liver extract and pancreatic enzymes and all of which sounds pretty scientific. But the basis of the treatment are the juices and the coffee enemas. And they tell you exactly how to make these juices, what vegetables to use and what fruits to use. And they sell you a juicer in order to do this. And this is very interesting because it gives them an out. This juicer is $2,000. Okay? And if the therapy doesn't work by people who have read the book and are trying the therapy at home, they tell them that it failed because they were using the wrong juicer. So it's a money-making scheme in many different ways. I mean, the juicer is just an ordinary juicer. Of course, juicers don't do anything different than squeeze the fruits or vegetables and juice them. And of course, as far as the coffee enema goes, they will also sell you the equipment for it. And they will teach you how to do this. The Gerson Institute is in Mexico, the Gerson Clinic. It's in Tijuana, although there are branches elsewhere too. There's a pretty big one in Hungary, of all places. But there's none in the US because in the US it would be illegal to promote something like coffee enemas. But they do have the Gerson Institute and Cancer Curing Society just on the US side of Tijuana, where they don't do any treatments, but they will do all the analysis and everything and then send you across the border to get the treatment. The place is now run by Max Gerson's daughter, Charlotte Gerson, and she has orchestrated a movie to be made about this called The Gerson Miracle, a book written about it, The Beautiful Truth. What do they have? When you read this, there are all kinds of anecdotes. People tell you that they've been to the Gerson Institute and they've been cured of their ailments. Okay? Because people don't think that they're going to follow up on this, but I do. So when I read the book and I saw these anecdotes, I said, okay, let's just follow up on this. So I called them in Tijuana and said, I see that these people are listed as, having been cured. Do you have any contact information for them? And I thought, of course, they would try to pass me off. Curiously, they didn't. They gave me 11 people who claimed that they had been cured of cancer at the Gerson Institute. And, these days, once you have the name, it's not that difficult to track them down. So we actually managed to track down all 11 and had their emails and had their phone numbers. It was very interesting. We couldn't contact 10 of them. You know why? They were dead. The 11th one had come back to the US and had legitimate chemotherapy and was still struggling with the disease. Okay? So those anecdotes are written, a couple of days after having this treatment. And of course, they play with your mind when you're told that you're going to get better and that you actually feel better. Yes, for a short time that can happen. And then, of course, people will very happily write anecdotes. But when you check later, and this was about 3 years after, they had written these anecdotes, and 10 of the 11 were gone. Jessica Ainska, the one that I mentioned to you, the Australian who was, also sort of portrayed in the movie, died of cancer at age 30 after she had gone to the institute in Mexico. So it really is heartbreaking to see this, because many of these patients could have been helped by legitimate therapy. But they have been so convinced by all of this, alternative literature and the alternative stuff that, we constantly see now on the internet, that they go that route, because they've been convinced that, all modern medicine wants to do was to cut you, to poison you, and to radiate you, so they talk about, surgery and radiation therapy and chemotherapy as if it was the greatest evil. Well, those are the only things that have a chance of actually curing you. But there's so much of this naysaying on the internet, against conventional science, that people no longer trust science, and they very easily bite into these therapies, because it's so seductive when you you see this kind of thing that think curable, Gerson therapy. Well, first of all, one thing that I should really understand is that we will never have one cure for cancer, because cancer is not one disease. I mean, the only thing that ties all the different types of cancer together is that they're all characterized by the irregular multiplication of cells. I mean, that's what cancer is, right? But lymphoma, leukemia, skin cancer, lung cancer, totally different diseases. I mean, you don't treat breast cancer the same way as you treat leukemia, right? So the very concept here that one simple, because it is pretty simple to shoot coffee up your butt instead of undergoing chemotherapy, right? But it's such nonsense to suggest that one therapy is going to cure every kind of cancer. But it's a seductive idea, right? So I think it's probably still on Netflix, Apple Cider Vinegar. It's worthwhile to see, because while they've changed, some of the characters, the story is absolutely true. So, of course, the question comes up, whatever happened to Bill Gibson, the woman who made so much money from, pretending that she had cancer, which she never had, and that she cured it. Well, here's the final story. She was taken to court, found guilty of fraud, and she had to pay 40,000, so $410,000 Australian dollars, basically for fraud. I think that's essentially getting away with it, because there should have been much more, for this. I mean, defrauding so many people like this. But anyways, you can see she never paid it. And she still has money, although, of course, she claims that she doesn't, that she's unable to pay the money. But as you can see, the story here tells you that she was going on trips, and she went to spent more than $90,000 in 2 years on trips to Bali and Africa. And she's getting away with it. And she still is today. So this is at least part of the story of what we now call the wellness industry, which is a big industry. And as I showed you at the beginning, they're making a lot of money from, on their Instagram and TikTok posts. And it's kind of sad that people are so easily taken in, and mostly by this, natural fallacy that things that are natural or therapeutic and things that are synthetic are dangerous. Anyway, I'll show you this again. So if you're interested in coming, you can go on the internet and go to our website, which is mcgill.ca/OSS. And I don't know if you point your camera there, it may pick it up. These days, the cameras pick up that, and then you can automatically register. Okay, questions? Yeah. All right. This whole pesticide business on food is total nonsense. And it is promoted by the Environmental Working Group, which is a totally unethical advocacy group in Washington that is funded by the organic food industry. The pesticide residues on food are very, very closely monitored, both in the US and in Canada. The regulations are very stringent. The first thing to understand is that pesticides are not used on a whim. There's no farmer that says, gee, I don't think I've been spending enough money to grow my crops. I'll think I'll go and buy some useless pesticides and put it on my crop so I can scare my customers. Okay? Pesticides are used because we could not possibly have the food supply that we have today without the use of agrochemicals. It would not be possible. And pretty soon, of course, we will have 10 billion people coming to dinner, and for sure they cannot be fed. So we need the fungicides, we need the herbicides, we need the insecticides. Yes, I mean you can grow organic, but that's a tiny percentage of of the total crops. It would be impossible to feed the world on organic crops. So anyway, the regulations are very stringent, and there is random testing that is done. Health Canada people go into supermarkets and will take random samples and test them. And it is almost never that you find residues that exceed the allowable level. And that allowable level has a huge safety margin built into it. The way that it is determined is by taking test animals, because I mean, obviously you can't do the test on humans. Taking test animals, feeding them increasing doses of whatever substance you're testing until you notice an effect. And then you cut it back just a bit to the maximum amount that causes no effect. This is called the NOAEL, the No Observed Adverse Effect level. That then is reduced by a factor of 100 to come up with the ADI, the acceptable daily intake for humans, which means what we're looking at is a substance at a level that causes no effect in a test animal, but we're consuming 1/100th of that, of what causes no effect. So that is about as safe as you can be. So all of this, activism by groups like EWG is not based on science. And they are funded by the organic industry, which is a giant industry. Also, they portray themselves as never using pesticides, which is totally false. There are a large number of pesticides that are allowed to be used on organic agriculture because the only criterion is that they have to come from a natural source. So, for example, you can use copper sulfate on organic agriculture because it's a substance that you can mine. It comes from nature. There are many others, organic pesticides like that. I think the best advice is to eat as many fruits and vegetables as you can. Whether they're organic or not doesn't matter. What matters is to get enough fruits and vegetables in your diet. That we know scientifically is beneficial. So that's the EWG story. There are residues of everything on everything. Okay? Yeah. Yes, but it really, when you're washing them with water, it's very important, but you're not washing them to get pesticide residues off. You're washing them to get bacteria off. That's very important. You have to understand that today, with the technology that we have, with the mass spectrometers that we have on various other instruments, we can detect substances down to parts per trillion. Okay? At the part per trillion level, everything is contaminated by everything else. It doesn't mean that it's dangerous. Just because you find something doesn't mean it's doing something. you always have to take into account amounts. Numbers matter. Numbers are the currency of science. So, things may be present, but they're present at such a trivial dose that it makes no difference. So in this way, in one sense, and I constantly accuse my analytical chemist colleagues of this, that they're the root of all our problems, because we're getting to a level where we're detecting smaller and smaller and smaller amounts of substances, and residues of everything are everywhere. I can tell you that I just did that. We could take that smear and you would find my DNA there. What does it mean? Nothing, except that we have extremely good technology. Okay. Yeah. Why what? What isn't? Oh, yeah, because they have very good lawyers and they're very careful about making claims. They skirt the law. If on the bottle they would say the treatment for such and such a cancer, the government would be after them in a jiffy. But they don't say that. They use all of these weasel words, like helps maintain, health, or whatever. What does that mean? So yeah, they're very careful with that, and they know how to protect themselves. And sometimes, the government will go after some of them. They'll go after some supplement manufacturer who has crossed the line and is saying something that they didn't say, and all right, so they'll go off the market for a while, then they'll be reborn under some other name. It's the best analogy I can tell you. It's like whack-a-mole. You whack one, comes up somewhere else. You can't beat them, because there's such significant amounts of money to be made, and that's a great lure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is true. Desperate people will do desperate things. That's that's true, and you know, I mean that is definitely so. I can tell you that when my back issue was much worse than what it is now, if someone would have told me to take roasted cockroaches dipped in fermented fly shit, I would have done it. Because that's when, and especially when you know that there's no legitimate help, yeah, you will resort to anything. Yeah. I mean, the obvious answer is that we need more doctors, and but that also means more money and more taxes, and people object to taxes, and it's a very complicated business. But I think also the press has overplayed the time frames. When you are detected with a very serious cancer here, you get treatment pretty quickly. It's this business of having to wait 6 or 9 months. Usually those are conditions where you can wait that long. When you have something that can't wait, you do get the treatment. But of course, we can always use more doctors. That's true. But I mean, I don't know what the calculation is, but to train a single doctor, I think is now $2 million. Yeah. By what? Oats. Yeah, I do. I like the taste better. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Not really. There's nothing wrong with rolled oats. Rolled oats really are what the term says. There's a machine with a roller that flattens out the oats so that they cook faster, right? Because you have greater surface area. I find steel cut oats have more of a nutty flavor, which you may like or not like. Yeah. Grass-fed, maybe. Grass-fed, maybe. The only thing is, there may be some value in grass-fed meat over other meat, but you shouldn't be eating that much meat where grass-fed makes a difference. You know, that's the. Uh, Otherwise, with organic, I would say that if money is absolutely irrelevant to you, buy organic. But you know what is happening, and you know all of these scares, what they've done is that they made people so scared that they want only organic, which is much more expensive. So they're ending up eating fewer fruits and vegetables. I mean, the bottom line is to eat as many fruits and vegetables as you can. If money is of no consequence to you, okay, go organic. All right, so we'll see you next month.